Hey champions, it's another edition of Burton's Middle Class Review. I know it's been a while since a video, but look, I'm getting back into it now, and you can find me on Facebook, Burton's Middle Class Review, so hope you can like and follow it. Also, if you like the content that I do in the videos, like, subscribe, share with your friends, because I like helping people as best I can, and tomorrow's December, first day of December, so pretty exciting leading up to the end of the year. And I'm going to go into a subject that, I've been basically fighting BS for ages now in my own life, and then doing Burton's Middle Class Review is about looking at all the, waging war on BS as I see it, and using logic and facts to back that up. So, look, I'm going to look at one area mainly is like people's, how they're making money and career path and things like that at the moment. And I think we've got a whole generation. You look at the Millennial Generation, born 1982 to 1997, and you can't generalise the whole generation, but geez, a lot of them, I think they've been pushed down the wrong path, and they've been fed a lot of BS, and then this is why they end up, disillusioned, and then they find movements like Communism and Socialism attractive. Well, here's the funny thing, guys, I actually get out and about, and I don't associate with just people who've been to uni, or Aussies, or middle class Aussies, and I tell you what, a lot of people I work with and I know are from third world countries or from socialist countries, or have experienced that sort of thing, and none of them like socialism or communism. It's terrible. Okay, it's appalling. I mean, Marxism, for instance, Marxism was responsible for 100 million deaths last century, but all these people who couldn't make it in the real world, who are now academics at universities. Hey, I went to university and I met people like this, and I can tell you now, they wouldn't last a New York minute in the real world and the real economy. The academic world and their socialist, Marxist, communist beliefs are their safety net, their security blanket for them. And it's pretty sad, because they pushed all this crap into especially millennials' heads. And I noticed it being a Gen X. I'm 45 years old. I noticed it when they were, there were some lecturers like that hell-bent on this rubbish, and I'm just thinking, that's not the real world, but hey, they had this utopian idea of how things would be and all this garbage, and now, well, it's borne fruit, hasn't it? We've now got this, just like socialist and Marxist communist regimes, we've now got censorship everywhere. We've got cancel culture, we've got all these appalling things, don't people learn the history? The Nationalist Socialist Workers' Party, that was the Nazis, another socialist movement. They did the same thing. You had to ban certain things, and they violently attack people who disagree with them. I mean, look, we've got Antifa now. I mean, that bumbling Joe Biden, I mean, the guy's obviously got the onset of dementia or something. I mean, he was saying in one of the presidential debates that, Antifa was just an idea. Well, you tell that to people who've been bashed up by these guys. I mean, even our local federal member, Peter Dutton, where I live here, just north of Brisbane, in Queensland, Australia, here he is, his own office had all the windows smashed by Antifa guys. I mean, we've had Andrew Bolt, just a conservative person in our media. He's been attacked a couple of times by Antifa. He's had to increase security on his own private home because of these thugs. But it's funny, they call them Antifa, like anti-fascist. It's funny, they look like the black shirt fascists from Italy in the 1930s. I mean, they act just like them. I mean, they are the fascists. But anyway, you've seen them in the United States, attacking people, and in the BLM, Black Lives Matter movement. Well, they're going around, it's mostly white people who go to college and stuff, who, creep out of their parents' basements or homes, and they go out and be violent and destroy property in minority areas. I mean, and that's supposedly against racism and fascism, go figure. But I think there's a reason for this rise in these movements and people finding the appeal of socialism and communism. They don't actually see the 100 million deaths from last century or anything. They don't see the bloody awful side of that. But I can understand why there seems to be appeal and why they've gone for that. Because if you're told all this nonsense at school, like the education system, well, look at who educates our students. 82% of teachers, at least in my home state of Queensland, are women. A lot of women vote left wing. They're teachers, so they're in a security blanket career, many of them. Many teachers do work very hard for their students, and they really want their kids to better themselves and that. But I do know personally people who got the job because they wanted a regular wage, and they've admitted it to me. I mean, even when I actually tried to join the army 3 times, I just wanted to do it out of like a community service role. I thought I owed my country something. And I had millennials who were school teachers saying to me, oh, that's good, you get good benefits, you might get an army house or something. And I'm like, what? That's not the reason to change careers. But anyway, due to having heart disease and having a knee reconstruction, I couldn't get into the infantry, and too old for special forces. But anyway, not to worry. But, I changed, and I actually looked at my own career and where I'm going with this. I'm looking at my own career, for instance, like I actually got accepted into 2 universities recently, and to do an extra year at uni and teach history and English. And I found that the curriculum, oh my God, I was looking at the history and I just went, this is really dumbed down to compared when I was doing it to when, I was studying history at high school, and I just thought, why don't they just call it social studies? It really isn't history. They're indoctrinating kids with these days. So that's just my opinion. Anyway, I've gone into a different career, basically, something that I like, but I know is in demand. So how do you know what's in demand? I think a lot of people, unfortunately, have gone to uni and they didn't do what's in demand. They do something like gender studies or postmodern feminist thought, and then they wonder why they can't get a job in the real world after it. Or they do get a job and they always go for a government job because they want that security blanket type job. And I was talking to a millennial recently. So this is people born from 82 to 97. And she was saying to me, even though I'm a millennial, she said, I don't want to hire these millennials who come into the public service, because she works for the federal government. She said, they come in and they're like, oh, they've been told all this nonsense at uni that they're the future and they're so good. It's like they're the best of the best just because they went to uni. And she said they'll do some degree and it's meaningless. It's meaningless in the real world. And she said even in government, it's meaningless. They seem to think they should be starting at the top or on big wages, straight away. And she said, I would rather get someone who actually didn't go to university, whose head wasn't filled with all this crap, who I could actually train to do the work. So that was quite interesting. It's quite an eye-opener. But I think that's why a lot of them do end up joining groups like Antifa or vote, have this idea, they vote accordingly. They vote for the Greens and all this stuff because they feel like, we're missing out. We studied all this stuff. We're so good. Why can't we? I studied anthropology or something, and then they wonder why it doesn't work in the real world. But anyway, this is why I changed careers recently. I mean, I've always been into having a job that gave me a lot of time, that allowed me to invest in property, renovate houses, do things like that. I love that sort of thing. Because real wealth is stored in, real assets, obviously. And also I like something that gives an income, cash flow. That's why I loved residential investment properties. I didn't go into commercial property because I foresaw, just looking at demographics and the change in society, when I studied at university, I did anthropology for 2 weeks and I just dropped it out. I had a fuddy-duddy lecturer. He was hopeless. And I thought, this is not going to help in the real world. So I swapped over to sociology. Thank God I did. I had a lecturer called C.K. Kwong, who was from Singapore. And if you know Singapore, it's a financial centre, and this guy was talking about things like, look, have 3 children, because he saw the demographic slide where the baby boomers are the biggest generation, their spending peaks, and the economy's going to go downhill because Gen X is a much smaller generation, which is my generation. He said even the millennials will be smaller, the baby boomers, even though the millennials are bigger as a group than my generation, they just won't have the effect of the boomers. And he was saying, look, have at least 3 kids. So he was looking at what he saw as this demographic cliff, basically. We're dropping off it, and then the economy's not recovering. And that's why for the last 20 years, we've had nothing but major money printing by central banks everywhere, and governments just spending, going into debt, trying to prop up the property market, prop up the share market, trying to keep this party going. But the fact is, every 70 to 100 years, you have an economic depression. It just happens. It's just generational. Also, every 8 to 10 years, you're meant to have a couple of years of recession, and have no growth. Have actually, basically a recession is where asset prices get so overpriced the market crashes because people just will not buy these things like shares or property, etc., at overinflated prices. So it crashes, and then, you know, bad companies go to the wall, the good companies become lean and mean, they survive, and then they get stronger. Well, they've been preventing this, and I think that's why we've got this generation of millennials who've come through for the last 20 years that haven't had recession in Australia, and they don't know what it's like to go without. You know, I finished high school in 1992, and we were in deep recession, and that was when, you know, I had friends, you know, who were quite successful now. We've done all right ourselves, but we were not going out buying coffees every day and spending up big and going on overseas holidays and all those things. We did things very differently. It was like, you know, you'd work 2 jobs, and a lot of your jobs we did, you know, just to get ahead in our industries. Like, I've got a friend, she's a very successful corporate lawyer now, but she was like working for 18 months, worked a day a week, 12 hours, 1 day a week, 12-hour day, got no money for it, just to get the foot in the door in the industry. Another mate of mine, he's a project manager, but he was doing 12 hours a day for an architect for a whole year, and after a year they said he'd do 12 hours, you know, 1 day a week. He did that for a whole year, and then after a year they said, oh, we might start paying you, we'll give you $50 a day. Hey, I was doing pineapple picking for like $60 or $70 cash on a Sunday. It was rubbish money. It was nowhere near minimum wage payments. But I did what I did just to get a bit of extra cash, and then I got smarter. I stopped doing that when I was about 22, 23, and you know, I was a manager at the time, and I was doing other work, and then started investing. I was investing in shares, sold them, went into property. But the thing is, I think a lot of young people now, they'll get disappointed, and they'll join Antifa or think socialist policy is the way to go. I see the supposed inequality, and the thing is, well, if you're going to study the wrong thing that's not in demand, you're going to fail. Now, that's just in the job section, but what about people who make a job for themselves? You know, I look at the UFC, fastest growing sport, has been for years in Australia, and UFC, you look at Ronda Rousey. Okay, she was the first female champion, and she won at least a dozen fights in a row, kept her crown, kept defending her title, and she actually approached Dana White, who was running UFC, and said, hey, I can make this happen. We need women, you know, mixed martial artists. I can make this work. And she put it to him and said, look, you know, and, you know, I was in the Olympics, got a bronze medal for fighting women there in judo. Why can't I do it and get paid in UFC? And he was a bit hesitant, saying, oh, you know, women beating each other up in the ring, oh, I don't know about that. But she brought it, and I'm telling you, here's her example. There's a lot of people who says, oh, it's the patriarchy who keeps women down, or there's this reason why some are rich and all this crap. And the fact is, I bring it down to 2 things, skill and competency. You've got to be competent, and you've got to have a skill that's in demand. Ronda Rousey created the demand. She saw a niche in the market. There were no women fighting in UFC. She basically brought a business plan to the guy who ran it and said, hey, I can make this work. And it did. After a first fight, Dana White buys her a brand new BMW SUV. And the crowds were bigger. The following got bigger because of Ronda Rousey. She was the top bill. Every time she fought, she was the last fight of the night. Okay? Men fought first before her. So, you know, she brought it, definitely. But she had the skill and the competency. And it's the same in any job situation. You know, like, why do certain people get paid more? Well, number one, they're doing a job or bringing a service or whatever it is that is in demand. Also, it could be more dangerous. They probably do more hours, things like that. I've gone into the automotive industry as a service technician, learning to do that, and I've got myself ahead there by, like, when I changed careers, I had a few months of annual leave up my sleeve. Instead of just having a holiday and taking a break, I went, right, that's my money to go into tools and training. So I've got more tools than, well, many of the people who are qualified there now, and, you know, I bought them. I didn't buy the best tools, I didn't buy Snap-on or anything, they're way too expensive, but, you know, I bought things at good prices. I've got the tools just what I need. I start doing jobs that are above my actual qualification level. I ask for help when I need it. I've got the attitude. You've got to have the right attitude. That's the number one thing. Also, I've gone into an industry that is massive demand, so I'm getting overtime, I'm getting weekly bonuses, things like that. So But the thing is also, I'm also thinking of the future. I'm not thinking about, well, I just want a high paying job with bonuses and that. That's not what I want. What I also want is, you know, I do want that obviously, but it's more. I want to get that money and put it into real assets that bring in income. I want passive income as well. I've always liked investing in property, that sort of thing, and I do have property. However, at the moment, I'm waiting for the sales to hit. So a lot of I did buy some shares recently when the last bit of a downturn happened some months ago. But you know, I think those shares are going to crash again soon. But I'm going to hang on to them anyway because you know, they're solid. They're solid shares that bring a good dividend, and I know they will for a long, long time. Also, I know that I think for a lot of young people, you know, I hope that they actually think more like that. You know, you really got to aim more for profits and stuff like that. And don't just study something because you like the area and think, oh, I will get a job just because I went to uni or something. Look, that's a loser's attitude. In this day and age, you really need to have a different outlook. You got to think differently. Aim for profits, not wages. Yeah, do something you like, not necessarily what you love, but do something you like and become passionate about it and have the right attitude towards it, and you will get the money. But it has to be a skill that's in demand. And I can see, you know, with demographics, so that's what I've studied, that's what I specialised in at university, and I know I've used that to my advantage, looking at what people do predictably as they hit certain ages. That's why I love demographics and sociology. Look, when people hit 46 on average in the Western world, their spending starts declining. So I think, you know, we've had all this quantitative easing and money printing because the baby boomers, they just stopped spending. And, you know, now they're retiring, but I think you can also see the opportunity here. Don't just think doom and gloom. You've got 2 billion, at least 2 billion people turning 65 between 2020 and 2030 in the world. So these people are going to demand certain services. They'll still need electricians. They'll still need plumbers. They'll still need mechanics. They're not going to be working on their own car when they've had a shoulder reconstruction or a hip replacement. They're not going to do that stuff. So they're going to have specialist technicians doing this work for them. They'll need health services, things like that. So for young people especially, you got to think about that. You got to think about what's going to be in demand. You know, what property is going to be in demand. Commercial property isn't going to be in demand. No way. People can work more from home now. You know, these COVID lockdowns have shown this. Forget commercial property. I can see a big downturn in a lot of big cities with commercial property and office space. But however, I think there'll be a lot of growth in properties such as retirement homes, nursing homes, things like that, for the 55s and over. So you've got to think like that. Also, you'll still have demand for nice middle class homes in good areas where there's good schools and shops like that. Why? Because I think we're going to have a hell of a crash in the stock market next year. I think all this money printing and stuff, like we've had JobKeeper, JobSeeker, which is just more welfare, very well paid welfare really. That's going to end in March next year, and then we're going to have a lot of assets are going to take a big hit. But then by 2022, 2023, that's when the Millennials, which is about twice the size of my generation, Generation X, that's when they're going to start, you know, they'll have their families, they'll need the upgrade car, they'll need the bigger house. So those things will be in demand. And then we'll have a slow growth period, but I think the stock market's going to be, we're not going to get back up to high levels of the stock market for a long, long time. It'll probably take a couple of decades at least. I mean, you look what happened after the Great Depression. Every 70 to 100 years we have a big Great Depression, and we've just had lots of money printing to prevent that since the year 2000. But when was the Great Depression? 1929 it hit. You know, stocks and that just collapsed, and they didn't recover until basically World War II, or after World War II. If history serves me correctly, so it was after World War II when they finally got back up. So it's going to take time, guys. And but if you're smart, you get into an industry or a job that is going to have the demand for the skills and the competency, you become skillful and competent in those areas, and then get cashed up, work as hard as you can, get cashed up and get ready to go into the asset classes after they crash. But also, if you're going to use debt, if you leverage yourself, remember, debt is like a loaded gun. A gun can be a very useful tool, but it can also kill you, okay? So you need to get educated, financially educated first before you do that sort of thing. And look, all I can say is best of luck to you. Hope it goes well. I'll be doing more videos later on different subjects like this. And to you millennials, it is not too late to turn around. I know not all of you are the same, but there is a big swath of this generation who have pretty much, you've believed the BS that was fed to you. And sorry if you studied certain subjects that aren't giving you any real financial reward in the real world. But you can always turn it around and realise you don't have to be a victim. You still have agency, and you have more opportunity now than ever to become successful and, you know, be middle class or even higher if you want to. So good luck to you guys. As always, stay awesome. Hope you like, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time. Stay awesome, guys.